The alien princess struck her human guard, then pirates attacked their ship. The slap came without warning. 1 second, Corporal Leon Grant was standing at his post outside the royal quarters, eyes forward, spine straight, hands folded behind his back the way he had been trained. The next second, a sharp crack split the air and his head snapped sideways. His ear rang. His cheek burned like someone had pressed a hot iron against it. He did not move. He did not speak. He breathed once through his nose and returned his gaze to the corridor ahead, as if nothing had happened. The princess stood 2 steps away. Her pale gold skin flushed a deep copper at the cheeks. Her silver eyes were wide, rimmed with something that looked almost like regret, though her jaw was still lifted in that particular angle that royalty seemed to be born knowing. She was young by her people's standards, somewhere between 60 and 90 years old, which translated to roughly 19 in human terms. She wore robes the color of deep water, and the hem barely grazed the floor as she breathed hard through her nose. "You are supposed to step aside," she said. Her voice had that layered quality all Valori had, 2 tones speaking at once, one higher and one lower, braided together like a cord. "When I give you a direct command, you obey." Leon said nothing. She had ordered him to unlock the hangar bay and let her take a scout ship alone into unmapped space because she was, in her own words, suffocating from obligation. He had said no, politely the first time, firmly the second time. She had struck him on the third. "Did you hear me?" she asked. "Yes, Your Highness," Leon said. "Then explain yourself." He finally looked at her. She was a full head shorter than him, which meant she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze. He kept his voice level, the way his sergeant had once described as concrete wrapped in cloth. "My orders are to keep you safe, Your Highness, not to make you comfortable. Those are 2 different things." Her nostrils flared, the copper flush deepened. "My father will hear about this. He already knows I won't let you leave the ship unescorted, Your Highness. He was the one who gave me the order." She stared at him for a long moment, and he watched something move behind those silver eyes, something complicated and quiet. Then she turned sharply and walked back through the doors of her quarters, and the doors slid shut with a sound like a whispered argument ending. Leon reached up and pressed 2 fingers against his cheek, still burning. He lowered his hand, rolled his jaw once, and went back to standing still. The ship was called the Oran Vale. It was a Valori diplomatic cruiser, long and curved like a crescent moon, with walls that shifted color depending on ambient temperature and corridors that smelled faintly of something like cedar and rain. Leon had been aboard for 6 weeks. He still got turned around near the engine section. He was one of 4 humans on the vessel, part of a joint escort detail that the Human Valori Accord required on all diplomatic missions above Tier 3. The princess was traveling to the Conclave Summit on Rethais Prime, where she would represent her father's empire in negotiations that had been decades in the making. She was young for such a responsibility. Everyone aboard the Oran Vale knew it. The princess knew it too, which was probably why she kept trying to do reckless things to prove she did not care. Leon had been assigned as her personal shadow 2 weeks into the voyage, after she had managed to slip her previous escort during a supply stop at the Oran station, and had wandered alone through a market district that 3 separate intelligence reports had flagged as high risk. Nothing had happened to her, but something could have, and that had been enough for Captain Dara Holt, the senior human officer aboard, to reassign Leon specifically. "She won't like you," Dara had told him. "Most people don't," he had answered. He had not been joking, and she had not laughed. Now he stood outside the princess's door in the amber half-light of the ship's night cycle and listened to the quiet hum of the engines 3 decks below. Somewhere down the corridor, one of the Valori crew was walking a slow patrol, their footsteps barely audible, soft as cloth dragged across stone. Leon had been standing for 4 hours. He could stand for 4 more. Then the ship's alert system screamed. It was not a gradual rise of tone. It was immediate, a full red band alarm, the kind that meant something had already happened rather than something might happen. The corridor lights dropped from amber to deep red. The hum of the engines changed pitch. Leon had his hand on his sidearm before the echo of the first alarm pulse had finished bouncing off the walls. He pressed his back to the door of the princess's quarters and faced the corridor. His earpiece crackled, and Dara's voice came through clipped and precise. "Leon, we have a contact. Multiple ships running dark until 30 seconds ago. They're close, really close." "Identification?" he asked. A pause, half a second, long enough to mean what she said next was bad. "Keth Raiders, 6 vessels. They've fired a tether line. They're trying to lock onto our hull." Leon felt the cold, focused calm that combat training put into a person settle over him like armor. "Is the princess secured?" Dara asked. He turned, hit the door panel, and stepped inside before the door had fully opened. The princess was standing in the center of her room, still dressed, her silver eyes already sharp with alarm. She had heard the sirens. She was not screaming. He gave her credit for that. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do not argue, do not ask questions, move." She opened her mouth. "Now, Your Highness." She closed her mouth and moved. The Orin veil shuddered as the first tether made contact with the hull. Leon felt it through the soles of his boots, a deep, resonant clang that vibrated up through the deck plating and into his knees. It was the sound of something large and metal hitting something larger and metal, and it carried with it a kind of finality, like a lock clicking shut from the wrong side. Princess Zavara. He had started thinking of her by name during the sprint down the corridor, because there was no room in a crisis for titles, stayed 2 steps behind him, close enough that he could hear her breathing. She was not panicking. He had half expected her to, but she kept pace without complaint, and when he grabbed her elbow to pull her sideways into an alcove as 3 Valori crew members ran past with weapons drawn, she leaned in instead of pulling back. "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice was low. The layered quality of it had flattened somewhat, stripped of the formal register she used in official settings. "Secure room on deck 4, he said. "Secondary armory adjacent. If they board us, we hole up there." "If." He glanced at her. "When?" She absorbed that without flinching. The ship lurched, a second tether further aft. The lights dropped again briefly, then steadied. Somewhere 2 decks above them, something exploded, not big, not structural, but enough to send a tremor through the walls. Leon guessed a corridor junction charge, the kind Keth Raiders used to force access doors when they could not crack the codes. The Keth were not sophisticated. They did not need to be. They were large, they were numerous, and they had been raiding shipping lanes in this sector for 11 years with a success rate that made the conclave deeply embarrassed and individual ship captains deeply afraid. They targeted diplomatic vessels when they could, because diplomatic vessels carried valuable passengers and were, by treaty, lightly armed. Someone had told them about the Orin Veil. Someone had told them the Emperor's daughter was aboard. Leon had been turning that thought over since the moment the alarm sounded. He filed it away for later. Right now there was only the corridor, the princess at his back, and the distance between here and deck 4. "There is another route," Zavara said. "If we go through the maintenance shafts below deck 2, we can come up directly beside the secondary armory without crossing the main corridor." Leon slowed. "You know the maintenance shafts?" "I know every passage on every ship I have ever traveled on," she said. "I find them on the first day." "In case." "In case of what?" She gave him a look that said the answer was obvious. "In case I need to leave without being followed." He almost said something about that. He decided not to. "Show me." She moved past him and he fell in behind her, reversing their positions, and he watched the corridor over her head as she led them toward a low access panel set into the wall near a cooling vent. She had the panel open in 4 seconds. He was starting to revise several of his earlier opinions about her. The shaft was narrow, designed for Valori maintenance workers who were, on average, slimmer than Leon. He moved through it on his elbows and knees with his sidearm in his right hand, the barrel pointing forward, his shoulder scraping the upper surface every few inches. Zavara moved ahead of him with a fluid ease that suggested she had done this before, possibly multiple times, possibly on ships where she absolutely was not supposed to. The ship took another hit. The shaft rang like a bell. Dust fell from the seams. Zavara froze for 1 second and he saw her hands grip the sides of the shaft, knuckles pale, and then she kept moving. They came up through a floor grate into a storage room adjacent to the secondary armory. Leon came through first, cleared the room in 3 seconds empty, and helped Zavara up after him. He crossed to the armory access panel, entered his clearance code, and the door opened. Inside, rack of pulse rifles, 2 shot cannons, a crate of concussion grenades, emergency hardsuits hanging on the wall. He was pulling a rifle from the rack when his earpiece crackled again. Leon, it was Dara. Her voice had changed, tighter, something underneath it that he recognized as the sound of someone who had just run hard and was working to keep their voice even. They're on the ship. Deck 3, forward section. 6 contacts confirmed, possibly more. Captain Valen is moving crew to intercept, but we're spread thin. Where are you? He asked. Bridge locked down. We've got 2 Valori guards and your man Cooper with me. A pause. They know where the princess is, Leon. Someone fed them a location. She needs to stay away from Deck 5. That was her original quarters, her registered location in the ship's manifest. We're on 4, he said. Armory. Good, stay there, lock the door. I'm working on getting the Conclave emergency beacon out, but our transmitter took damage from the first tether strike. Give me 20 minutes. Understood. He closed the channel and looked at Zavara. She was watching him with those silver eyes, and the copper flush was gone from her skin now, replaced by a careful stillness. They know where I was, she said. It was not a question. Yes. Someone on this ship told them. That's what it looks like. She was quiet for a moment, then Corporal. Grant. Grant. She said it with the careful precision of someone cataloging a new word. Were you the one who told my father I had left the ship at Oran Station? He looked at her. I filed a report, yes. She nodded slowly, as if something had just clicked into place. Is that why you were reassigned to me? Partly. She turned and looked at the rifle rack. Can I use one of those? He studied her. Have you trained? She pulled one of the pulse rifles off the rack, checked the charge cell with a motion that was practiced and clean, and settled it against her shoulder with the barrel pointed safely at the floor. The stance was not perfect, but it was not wrong either. My father did not want me to come on this voyage, she said. I insisted. He made me spend 3 months in training before he agreed. A small pause. I think he hoped I would quit. Did you almost quit? Every day. She glanced at him sideways, and something moved in her expression, brief and unguarded, like a window open for 1 second before the shutters close. But I do not quit things. Leon reached up and pulled a rifle for himself. No, he said, I didn't think you did. Outside in the corridor beyond the armory's sealed door, boots hit the deck heavy, too heavy for Valori crew. Keth, 3 of them, maybe 4, moving fast. Leon took position beside the door. Zavara moved to the opposite side without being told. He looked at her, she looked back at him. They waited. The footsteps passed. 4 sets, moving toward the forward corridor, drawn by something, a sound, a reading on their scanners, or whoever was feeding them information had given them a wrong location. Leon let out a breath through his teeth and kept his back flat to the wall. Beside him, Zavara had not made a single sound for the last 3 minutes. He was aware of the warmth of her arm 6 inches from his, and the way she was holding her rifle, thumbs properly positioned, finger indexed outside the trigger guard until it was needed. Whoever had trained her had known what they were doing. He pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. Dara. Static, a burst of it. Then her voice, broken and choppy. Beacon is working on the relay, might have 15 minutes before. The feed died. Leon lowered his hand. He looked at the ceiling, at the lights humming above them, at the small camera mounted in the corner of the room that was probably still transmitting to a bridge that had its hands full. Your communications are down, Zavara said quietly. Partially. That is not random damage. Someone cut specific lines. No, he agreed. It isn't. She turned the rifle over in her hands once, a restless motion, and then stilled it. There are 12 crew on this ship, 4 human escort, 8 Velori. I have known 4 of the Velori since I was a child. A pause. The other 4 were assigned to this voyage specifically. I do not know them. Leon filed that. He had already been thinking about the same problem from a different angle, who had access to both the princess's location data and the Keth communication networks. It was a short list. He had been running down the names in his head since the moment Dara said someone had fed them a location. There is a man named Orvin, Zavara said. He joined the crew at the last port rotation, navigation secondary. He has been watching me since the 3rd day. Watching you how? Not the way men watch women, she said without embarrassment. The way watchers watch assignments, checking where I am, how many people are near me, what time I move between rooms. She paused. I noticed because I do the same thing. Leon looked at her. I told you, she said. I find the passages on the 1st day. He thought about the girl who had slipped her escort at Oran Station and wandered a flagged market district alone, and about the girl standing here now, reading crew behavior from memory, holding a rifle with clean hands, not flinching at the sounds of Keth boots on the deck above them. He adjusted something in his understanding of who she was. Can you get to the bridge through the maintenance shafts? He asked. She thought, yes, it would take longer. The shafts on deck 2 run in a wide arc. We would have to go aft first and then come forward from the port side. How long? 12 minutes, maybe 10 if we move fast. He checked his sidearm, then slung the rifle across his back. Better to move with the handgun. The shafts were too narrow for a long weapon. He handed Zavara his backup sidearm, a compact pulse pistol, and took the rifle from her. She looked at the pistol, then at him. The rifle is harder to maneuver, he said. You'll be faster with that. She holstered it with a motion that said she understood. They found the nearest shaft access behind a cooling unit in the back of the armory. Leon went first this time, his call not hers. She did not argue. They moved in the dark, him with a small light clipped to his collar, her navigating from memory. She only hesitated once at a junction, and the hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. Halfway through the arc toward the port side, they heard voices. Not Keth, Velori. One voice, low and rapid, speaking into something a communicator Leon guessed. The words were too quiet and too fast for his rudimentary Velori to catch, but he did not need to understand the words. He understood the tone, reporting, giving information, the specific measured rhythm of someone relaying coordinates. He felt Zavara go absolutely still beside him. He put his hand on her arm. She did not move. The voice continued for another 30 seconds, then stopped. Footsteps moved away below them. They held position for 2 full minutes. Then Leon moved again, and Zavara followed. She did not say anything for the rest of the crawl. But when they came up through the access point on deck 2, port side, and the bridge door was 30 feet ahead of them, she paused and spoke quietly. It was Orvin. I know, Leon said. How did you know? The cadence. It matched the voice pattern of the position report he gave the morning of departure. I only heard it once, but it was distinctive. She looked at him the way she had looked at the pulse pistol, quickly calibrating, fitting a new piece into a picture she had been building. You memorize voices. I memorize things that might matter, he said. It's a habit. She nodded once, slowly. Then she squared her shoulders, held the pistol with both hands, and looked at the bridge door. "My father's guards will be inside," she said. "Leuven and Cass. I have known them since I was 4 years old." "Good. They will not shoot us if I call out first." "Good," he said again. "You go first then." She gave him a look that, under different circumstances, he thought might have become something like a smile. Then she moved toward the door. He covered the corridor behind them. She keyed the intercom. "Leuven, it's Zavara. Open the door. I have the human guard with me. Do not shoot him." A long pause, then the door opened. Captain Dara Holt was a woman who did not look surprised often. She looked surprised when Leon walked onto the bridge with the princess at his side and a rifle on his back. The bridge was small and bright, lit by the pale blue running lights that meant the ship's main power was compromised. Dara stood near the communications console, her dark hair pulled back, a cut along her jaw that had been hastily taped. Beside her, Private Aaron Cooper, barely 20 years old, 3 months out of training, and very clearly trying not to show how frightened he was, held his rifle in a grip that was too tight. 2 Valori guards flanked the door. They lowered their weapons when Zavara raised one hand. "The beacon?" Leon asked. "Almost," Dara said. She glanced at Zavara. "Is she hurt?" "No," Zavara answered before Leon could. "I am not hurt. Where are the Keth?" 2 decks below us, moving through the ship. They have not reached the bridge yet because Captain Valen locked down the vertical lifts, but they will cut through eventually." Dara looked at Leon. "We have maybe 8 minutes. "Orvin," Leon said. "Navigation secondary. Where is he now?" Dara's eyes sharpened. "Lower deck, last position. Why?" "He's the source." A silence. Dara absorbed it without visible emotion, the way experienced officers absorbed bad news, not by pretending it was not bad, but by refusing to let it stop the next thought. "Can you prove it?" "I heard him transmitting." Zavara identified the voice. The Keth knew a specific location on the ship. He had access to her location data from his navigation console. Dara nodded. "Leuven," she said to the taller of the Valori guards. "Go find him. Don't let him transmit again." The guard moved immediately. Leon crossed to the communications console and looked over the technician's shoulder. A young Valori woman named Sieve, who was working with the focused intensity of someone who had been fighting a problem for 20 minutes and was nearly through it. "What do you need?" he asked. "The bypass is almost through," Sieve said without looking up. "The relay was cut at junction 47. I rerouted through the secondary array, but the encoding handshake keeps dropping. If someone can hold the manual signal amplifier against the transmitter housing." She gestured vaguely at a component on the console without taking her eyes off her screen. "The handshake will stabilize." Leon picked up the component. It was a small box with a copper contact plate and a grip handle, and he held it against the side of the transmitter, housing the way she indicated. A light on the console shifted from red to amber. "Hold it," Sieve said. He held it. The ship shuddered. Another tether line closer this time. Something heavy hit the deck above them. "They're on too," Cooper said, voice tight. Dara moved to the door. "Cass, position." The second Valori guard moved to cover the door from the inside. Dara drew her own sidearm and stood to the left of the frame. Leon kept the amplifier pressed against the housing. His knuckles were white. His arm was beginning to vibrate from the strain of holding the contact steady against the oscillation of the hull. Zavara crossed the bridge, took the amplifier from his hand, pressed it against the housing at the exact right angle and held it there. Her arms were steadier than his. She planted her feet wide and looked at Sieve. "Like this?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Sieve said. Leon picked up his rifle. The doors at the far end of the corridor blew open. He heard it before he saw it, a sharp crack, a billow of pressurized gas, and then the thudding of boots on the floor plating. Heavy, fast, 3 contacts minimum coming from the starboard side approach. Dara met his eyes. He moved to the right side of the bridge door. She held the left. "Cooper," she said quietly, "stay behind the console. Do not move unless I say." Cooper moved behind the console. His face was pale, but his hands had steadied on the rifle. The boots got louder. Leon breathed in once through his nose. Breathed out. The first Keth came around the corner at a run, large, bipedal, gray-skinned, wearing the kind of patchwork armor that raiders assembled from whatever they could salvage. It was carrying a disruption lance that crackled with a greenish charge at the tip. Leon fired. The shot took it in the shoulder and spun it sideways into the wall. It did not go down. They almost never went down on one shot. He fired again. This time it went down. Behind him, he heard Dara fire twice. The corridor became noise and light and the acrid smell of burnt composite. He was counting, 2 contacts neutralized, moving on the third, and the third was smarter than the first 2, had dropped low and was moving along the wall where the angle was difficult, and Leon adjusted and fired again, and a sound cut through everything else. Not a weapon, not an explosion. A tone, rising and sustained, coming from the communications console. "Got it," Sieve's voice, high and sharp with relief. "Beacon is transmitting. Conclave emergency channel, they have our position." The tone continued. The bridge filled with it, a single clear note that meant help was coming, that somewhere in the dark of space a receiver had pinged and logged their coordinates and flagged them as a priority response. The third Keth, hearing it, paused. Leon fired. It did not pause again. He stood in the corridor for 2 more seconds, then stepped back into the bridge. His ears were ringing. His shoulder ached where he had braced the rifle too hard against the recoil. He scanned Dara upright, Cooper upright, Sieve still at the console with her hands flying over the interface, the 2 Valori guards at the door, the princess. Zavara had not moved from the transmitter. She was still holding the amplifier pressed to the housing with both hands, her face set and calm, her eyes fixed on the amber light that had not yet turned green. Her knuckles were white, her jaw was tight, and she was not looking at the corridor or the fallen Keth or anything except the console that needed to stay connected. The light turned green. She lowered the amplifier carefully, set it down on the console, stepped back. Then she turned and looked at Leon, and the careful stillness in her face broke open for just a second into something raw and young and real, not fear, but the aftermath of fear, the sharp and shaking exhale of someone who had held on all the way through and was only now allowing themselves to feel the weight of it. He met her eyes. "You did well," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away and the stillness came back and she squared her shoulders. "So did you," she said. He did not answer because there was more to do. He moved back to the door and checked the corridor and thought about the 6 Keth still somewhere on the ship and the 8 to 12 minutes that Dara had said they had, which had already run down, and about Orvin, and about Leuven who had gone to find him, and about the beacon that was now transmitting into the dark. Help was coming. They only had to hold. The Conclave response ship arrived 43 minutes after the beacon transmission. 43 minutes was a long time. Leon would remember it in the specific, layered way that combatants remember duration, not as a single block of time but as a sequence of compressed moments. The second firefight in the port corridor, shorter and sharper than the first. The 12 minutes of silence after that, every person on the bridge holding still and listening. The moment when Leuven came back through the door with Orvin in tow, the navigator's hands restrained, his face blank with the specific blankness of a man who knew he had been caught and had accepted it. The slow realization, spreading through the bridge, that the Keth had gone quiet. They had not left, their ships were still tethered, but they were not advancing. And when Leon thought about why, the answer that came to him was the beacon, the transmitting beacon, broadcasting on a Conclave emergency channel, telling anyone in range that a diplomatic vessel had been attacked and help was coming. Keth raiders were violent and brutal and efficient, but they were not suicidal. They would not risk a conclave rapid response unit for a prize they had not yet secured. They were waiting too, deciding, doing the math. The math turned against them when the response ship dropped out of transit 43 minutes later and lit up the Oran Vale with 6 target locks simultaneously. The Keth ships released their tethers within 30 seconds of that. Leon watched them go on the bridge monitor, 6 dark shapes peeling away from the hull of the Oran Vale and accelerating into the dark, graceless and fast, like things thrown rather than driven. They did not return fire. They did not posture. They simply left because the math had changed. Captain Valen, who had been holding the engine room with 3 crew members and a remarkable amount of stubbornness, restored main power 11 minutes after the raiders cleared sensor range. The bridge lights came up from blue to white. The hum of the engines deepened to a healthy, steady drone. Dara filed her incident report standing up, dictating it to the ship's log in the clipped, precise sentences of someone who had written too many of these and had learned not to waste words. Leon gave his own report to the conclave officers who boarded from the response ship, 2 humans, 1 Valori, all of them the kind of controlled and professional that meant they had been doing this for a long time. They took Orvin into custody without incident. He did not speak. Leon stood in the corridor outside the bridge for a while after the formal proceedings ended. The ship smelled of burnt composite and something sharper, chemical, that came from the disruption lances the Keth had carried. Maintenance crews were already moving through the lower decks, assessing damage, sealing breaches. Someone had strung temporary lighting through the section where the corridor junction charge had gone off. It gave the area a dim, amber quality, like the inside of a lantern. He was still standing there when Zavara came out of the bridge. She was carrying 2 cups small, the kind used for the bitter Valori brew that tasted like strongly caffeinated bark. She held one out to him. He took it. He did not say anything, neither did she. They stood in the amber corridor and drank, and the ship moved around them. Crew voices, distant footsteps, the settling sounds of a vessel that had been struck and was now slowly returning to itself. "I owe you an apology," Zavara said. He looked at her. "I struck you," she said it plainly without softening it or building toward it. "That was wrong. I was frustrated and I behaved like a child and I struck you and that was wrong." Leon looked at his cup. "You were trying to leave the ship alone in a sector with active pirate activity, traveling under a diplomatic seal that makes you a target, with no escort and no way to call for help. I was not going to let you do that. I know," a pause, "I know that now in a different way than I knew it then." He considered that. There was something honest in it, not the dishonest kind of apology that wrapped itself in explanation until the apology disappeared, but the kind that looked directly at what had been done and named it. "Apology accepted," he said. She nodded once. They were quiet again. After a while she said, "You called me by my name during the crawl through the shafts." He thought back. He had not said it aloud. He had thought it. "In your head," she said, "I could tell. You stopped calling me Your Highness." He had not realized it was that visible. "I was focused on other things." "I know," she turned the cup in her hands. "I do not mind. It felt like you were actually looking at me, not at the title." She paused. "People rarely do that." He thought about the girl who mapped escape routes on the first day of every voyage. The girl who memorized crew behavior and identified a traitor before anyone else had looked twice. The girl who had held an amplifier steady against a shuddering hull with Keth raiders 40 feet away and had not moved until the light turned green. "You handled yourself well today," he said. "Not just competently, actually well." She was quiet for a moment. "I was afraid." "I know. But I did not let it stop me." "No," he said, "you didn't." She looked at him, and there was something in the look that was neither the royal coldness she wore in formal settings nor the raw, unguarded moment from the bridge, something between the two, quieter than both. An acknowledgement of shared ground. the particular kind of regard that forms between people who have moved through the same fire and come out the other side. "My father will ask me for a report on your performance," she said, "when we reach Rithai's prime." I assumed he would. "I will tell him that you are the most qualified person on this ship for the role you were given." A pause. "And that I made your work unnecessarily difficult, and that I am sorry for it." Leon looked at her for a moment, then he looked back down at his cup. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "That is why I am going too." The Oran Veil moved through the dark, trailing one of its outer lights, its hull bearing the scorch marks and scrape lines of a fight it had survived. The Conclave response ship held position a kilometer off the port bow, a steady presence, a guarantee. Ahead, still many hours away, the Rithai system was a faint cluster of signals on the navigation display, a destination and a purpose, and all the complicated weight of what Zavara had come this far to do. Leon finished his cup. Zavara finished hers. Neither of them spoke again for a while, but the silence had a different texture now. Not the guarded, formal distance of two people who occupied roles on opposite sides of a protocol barrier, but something more like the easy quiet of people who have decided, without saying so aloud, that they trust each other. He took her empty cup when she was done and set both of them on the ledge of a wall panel. He straightened. She straightened beside him. "Get some sleep," he said. "We have a long approach to Rithai's." "Will you sleep?" she asked. "After I check the perimeter." She gave him that sideways look again, the almost smile. "You are very stubborn." "So are you, Your Highness." She walked back toward her quarters. At the corner, she glanced back at him, not the glance of someone checking whether they were being followed, but the glance of someone choosing to look back. Then she turned the corner, and her footsteps faded, and Leon stood alone in the amber corridor with the sound of the engines below him and the quiet of a ship settling back into itself after a storm. He stood for another moment. Then he began his perimeter check. He would do it twice, because once was never enough, and because some habits were not stubbornness, but simply the ongoing commitment of a person who had decided that the people in his care were worth the extra time, the extra vigilance, the extra hours of standing still in a corridor that smelled of cedar and rain and the aftermath of violence. The Oran Veil moved toward Rithai's prime. And for the first time in a long time, Leon Grant thought that the thing he was doing mattered, not because an order said it should, but because he had looked at the person he was protecting and seen, behind all the ceremony and the difficult edges and the complicated pride, someone worth protecting. That was enough. That was, in the end, everything.